Hello.
I wasn't supposed to stay with my aunt this summer. The plan was to crash at my friend's place for a couple weeks until my new lease kicked in, but then he bailed for a last-minute trip to Europe. With nowhere else to go, and a heavy reluctance to move back into my parents' house, I messaged Aunt Julia. She replied in less than 10 minutes. Of course you can stay. The guest room's all yours. Just don't judge me for living in yoga pants and drinking too much coffee. That was Julia in a sentence. Funny, relaxed, warm in a way that never felt forced. She wasn't my actual aunt, just my mom's best friend since college, but I'd called her that for as long as I could remember. When I was little, she babysat me more often than not. We had our own inside jokes, a shared love for old cartoons, and a standing pizza ritual every time my mom went out of town. I hadn't seen her in over 2 years. Now I was 22, done with finals, and standing on her porch with a duffel bag slung over my shoulder. I knocked twice. She opened the door barefoot, with her hair up in a messy twist and an oversized t-shirt that said, "Gallery people are my people." She looked exactly like I remembered, and nothing like I remembered. Same laugh, same way she tugged her sleeves over her wrists, same scent, vanilla and clean cotton. But there was something different now. Maybe it was me, or maybe it was the way her eyes stayed on mine just a second longer than I expected. "Wow," she said, leaning against the doorframe with a grin. "You've gotten tall." I gave a half laugh. "You've gotten more mugs. I see you're still collecting them." She stepped aside to let me in. "Come on. You can make fun of my kitchen later." Her house was exactly as I remembered it. The same wooden floors that creaked in the hallway. The same hanging plants in the window. The same mismatched cushions on the couch. But the air felt different. Still warm. Still hers. Just older. Softer. "You hungry?" she asked, heading toward the kitchen. "I made that spinach pasta you used to inhale like a vacuum." I followed her. That's still my superpower. We ate at the island, catching up between bites. She told me about the gallery she was curating for, a new artist she'd found, her back and forth with the HOA over her 2 tall sunflowers. I told her about college, almost failing statistics, working late nights at the campus coffee shop, sleeping through lectures. Felt easy, like no time had passed. Except time had passed. When she reached across the counter to hand me a napkin, her fingers brushed mine. It was nothing, a split second, but it felt warmer than it should have. She didn't react, just kept talking. I nodded along, but my focus was shot. Later that evening, after helping her carry in groceries from the car, she showed me to the guest room. It smelled like lavender and fresh sheets. There was a note on the dresser in her handwriting. "Use whatever towels you want. Coffee's automatic at 7. You know the rest." I smiled to myself. She hadn't changed a bit. Except, again, she had. That night, I lay on the bed staring at the ceiling. I could hear her footsteps in the hallway, soft and rhythmic. She passed by my door twice, once humming something under her breath. I closed my eyes and tried not to think about how that hum used to calm me down when I was 8, and how now, at 22, it did something entirely different. The next morning, I woke to the smell of coffee and music playing low from the kitchen. I padded out barefoot, still groggy, rubbing my eyes. She was already there, in a ribbed tank top and loose pajama pants, hair wet from a shower and skin still glowing slightly. "Morning," she said, looking up from her mug. "Coffee's fresh. Smells like heaven." She smiled. "Cream's in the fridge. You still take it black, right?" I nodded, then caught myself watching the way her shoulder moved as she stirred her cup. It wasn't intentional. It just happened. She turned and caught my gaze for a half second. I looked away quickly. Her voice was calm. "You okay?" "Yeah, just spaced out." She nodded, not questioning it. But there was something in her expression I couldn't read. We sat at the table, mugs in hand, soft light coming in through the blinds. She talked about her weekend plans. Some errands, a gallery call, maybe rearranging her bookshelves. I tried to focus on her words, but my brain kept circling back to that moment she caught me looking. Did she notice what I saw? Did she care? After breakfast, I offered to help clean the patio furniture. Something about early summer dust and pollen. She accepted with a smile and handed me a rag and a spray bottle. The day stretched uncomfortably. Familiar, but filled with moments that made me second-guess myself. The brush of her hand on my back as she passed by. The way she tugged her shirt down slightly when she caught me standing nearby. The way her laugh seemed a little softer when it was just the two of us. I told myself I was imagining things. That night, I lay awake again, the house quiet around me. Somewhere down the hall, her bedroom light clicked off. But my thoughts were just beginning to flicker. It was going to be a long summer. The second day felt like slipping into a rhythm I didn't realize I'd missed. Julia made pancakes and put on some old jazz record that crackled slightly through the speakers. She moved around the kitchen like she owned the entire morning, barefoot, humming, absent-mindedly swaying her hips to the beat. I tried not to notice. I tried not to let my eyes linger too long when she reached up to grab something from the shelf, her tank top riding just an inch higher than it should. But something about the way she moved, it wasn't like I remembered. Or maybe I had never really looked before. She caught me watching once, as I poured coffee. Our eyes met for only a second, but it felt longer. I quickly looked down, focused hard on stirring sugar that wasn't even there. She didn't say anything, just smiled softly and turned back to the stove. After breakfast, I offered to fix the loose curtain rod in the living room. She insisted it wasn't urgent, but handed me a screwdriver anyway. The afternoon passed in little tasks. Moving a box to the attic, cleaning out a drawer she'd been avoiding, testing old light switches. But the silence between us had changed. It wasn't uncomfortable, just tuned, sharper, aware. Once, while moving books from the floor to a shelf, she bent beside me, reaching for a stack. I stepped back slightly, giving her space, but she didn't move right away. I caught the scent of her conditioner, something soft and floral. Her arm brushed against mine. She glanced up at me, her face close enough that I noticed the way her lashes curled slightly inward. We both paused. Then she gave a short breath of a laugh and stood. "You're jumpy today," she said. "I'm not jumpy." She raised an eyebrow, amused. "Right?" I busied myself with the bookshelf, heart hammering faster than it should have. Was she messing with me? Or just being herself? That evening, I showered early and retreated to the guest room with a book I didn't plan to read. I could hear her voice faintly through the hallway, on the phone, maybe, or singing again. I didn't mean to listen, but the sound of her moving through the house was magnetic. Around 9 o'clock, I left my room to grab a bottle of water. As I passed her bedroom, the door was half open, light spilling softly into the hallway. I glanced just for a moment. She was standing near her dresser, her back to me, mid-change. She had just pulled a new shirt over her head and was smoothing it down. Her hair was loose now, falling over one shoulder. The old shirt she'd been wearing was on the floor. Her pajama shorts hugged her hips lightly, just enough to draw my attention. I should have looked away immediately, but I didn't. Something about the scene, her calmness, the way her skin caught the light, the casual way she reached for a drawer, held me there. It didn't feel perverse, just human, curious. And that's when she turned. Not fast, not startled, just a slow pivot, like she sensed someone watching and wanted to be sure. Her eyes landed on mine instantly. I froze. Everything in my body screamed to move, to apologize, to disappear, but I couldn't. My breath caught in my chest. My pulse thundered in my ears. She looked at me for a second, two. Then her lips parted, just slightly, and she said calmly, like it was the most natural thing in the world, "You like what you see?" No anger, no embarrassment, just that line, balanced perfectly between playfulness and challenge. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. I must have looked completely stunned because she smiled. A real one. Not mocking. Not cold. Just knowing. Then she walked to the door and, without a word, pulled it gently closed. Click. Silence. I stood there in the hallway, stunned. Still holding the empty glass I'd meant to fill. Still barefoot in my thin t-shirt and sweats. Still burning. She had seen me, and she hadn't looked away. She hadn't yelled. She hadn't laughed. She had just spoken, like she was offering me something I didn't yet understand. Back in the guest room, I sat on the edge of the bed for what felt like hours. My thoughts were scrambled, skipping between guilt and heat, between shame and something dangerously close to excitement. What had that meant? Was it a joke? A test? A warning? I replayed the moment again and again. The turn, the line, the smile, the sound of the door clicking closed. And every time I got to that part, "You like what you see?" my stomach twisted in a way I couldn't explain. The worst part? The answer was yes. But I didn't know what to do with that. Not then. Not yet. The next morning, I woke up early, even though I'd barely slept. The house was quiet. The air felt still. When I stepped into the kitchen, she was already there, leaning against the counter in a long t-shirt and messy bun, sipping from her favorite mug like nothing had changed. "Morning," she said. "Morning." She didn't mention last night. Neither did I. But the silence that filled the room wasn't the same anymore. It was heavier, warmer, and full of questions neither of us was ready to ask. Yet, the day after she caught me staring should have felt awkward. But it didn't. At least not in the obvious way. Julia acted normal. Not forced, not exaggerated, just like herself. She asked if I wanted oatmeal or eggs, made both when I hesitated, and hummed a soft tune under her breath as she moved around the kitchen. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted beneath the surface. Something quiet, something deliberate. She didn't bring it up. Neither did I. But every time our eyes met, even briefly, something flickered there. A recognition, a challenge, a question neither of us dared to voice. After breakfast, she asked if I could help her reorganize the laundry closet. There were boxes of seasonal stuff she hadn't touched in months, and a steps tool she didn't trust anymore. "Unless you want me falling off and breaking something important," she said lightly. I followed her to the hallway. The closet door creaked open to reveal a chaotic stack of boxes, towels, spare bulbs, and what looked like a broken fan. "Top shelf," she said, pointing. "Blue one." I stepped up carefully, one foot on the built-in shelf and one hand braced against the frame. The plastic bin wasn't heavy, but it was just awkward enough to require balance. That's when I felt her behind me. Close. I hadn't noticed her move that near, but I could feel her. The warmth of her body, the scent of her shampoo, lavender and mint, the faint touch of her hand reaching toward the lower shelf beside my leg. The bin shifted slightly as I pulled it out. My grip slipped. I wobbled. Her hands caught my waist instantly. Not hard, not fast, just firmly, gently, grounding. "You okay?" she asked, her voice low, calm. I nodded, swallowing. "Yeah, just lost my footing for a sec." Her hands didn't move. For a long second, she just stood there behind me, fingers resting on either side of my shirt, steady. Then I turned slightly and realized how close we were. Her eyes were already on mine. Neither of us moved. The air between us was dense, thick, alive. Her hands finally dropped away, but slowly, like she didn't want to. "Got it?" she asked, her tone casual, but quieter than before. "Yeah," I said, voice uneven. "Got it." I carried the bin to the floor, trying not to let my hands shake. She knelt beside me to open it, knees brushing mine. For a moment, we were both leaning over the same box, both pretending to look at winter scarves and string lights like it mattered. But I wasn't thinking about scarves. I was thinking about her breath on my shoulder, and the fact that I didn't want to move away. Later that afternoon, she disappeared into the backyard to water her plants. I stayed in the guest room, pretending to scroll through my phone, but mostly just staring at the ceiling. My brain wouldn't stop replaying that moment in the hallway. The feel of her hands on my waist. The way her voice dipped when we locked eyes. She wasn't playing innocent anymore, but she wasn't crossing a line either. That night, after dinner, we sat on the couch with a movie playing softly in the background. Something old and slow-paced. I wasn't watching it. She was curled up at one end in a long cardigan, her legs tucked under her, a glass of wine in hand. I sat at the other end, unsure if I should stretch out or stay stiff and polite. The wine had made everything softer, quieter, warmer. We talked between scenes, about books, about how hot the summer had already gotten, about nothing. At one point, she reached for the remote and her hand grazed mine. She didn't pull back. Neither did I. It was the lightest touch, but it lingered, just long enough to mean something. She looked at me then. Her eyes weren't teasing. They were open, calm, focused. Then she smiled. Not big, not sharp, just enough. "I forgot how quiet you can be," she said. "I forgot how much I like quiet." We sat there, neither moving, her knee now resting lightly against mine. Through the soft light, through the low hum of the movie, through the weight of her presence beside me, I knew something had shifted again. She leaned back slightly, adjusting her sweater, and tucked one arm behind her head. The motion pulled the cardigan just slightly off her shoulder. Her skin glowed in the light of the screen. I didn't stare, but I saw it. She caught my glance. Her lips curved faintly. Then she looked away. No words, no questions. Just that same pause, that same undercurrent, that same awareness that had been building since the hallway, since the bedroom, since everything. When the movie ended, she stood slowly. "I'm heading to bed," she said, voice soft. "Don't stay up too late." "Night," I said quietly. She paused by the hallway, looked back once. "You always did notice the little things," she said. I nodded. "I still do." She held my gaze for a second, then turned and walked away. I sat on the couch long after she disappeared. The room still smelled faintly like her shampoo and wine. My skin still remembered her hands on my waist. And my thoughts were anything but quiet. I didn't know what was happening, but I knew it wasn't accidental. Not anymore. The next day was quieter. Not awkward, just more careful. Julia and I moved around each other like people pretending not to notice the weight of everything unsaid. She made French toast. I washed the dishes. We talked about the weather and her coworker's annoying new boyfriend. Nothing touched the edges of the night before, but the tension was still there. It followed us like a shadow. Around sunset, she asked if I wanted to go for a walk. "The trail's nice this time of evening," she said. "And it's not as humid." I said yes. We left the house in near silence. The path behind her place led into a small wooded stretch that circled a narrow pond. We walked side by side, slowly. The air was soft, golden. Crickets buzzed faintly in the trees. "I used to come out here all the time," she said. Even before I moved in. I nodded. I remember. You took me here once when I was a kid. You told me it was your thinking path. She smiled. I still do that. Think too much, I mean. We stopped near the edge of the water. She crossed her arms loosely, staring at the reflection of the trees. I've noticed, I said carefully, that you've been different lately. She looked at me sideways. Different how? I don't know. Just more real. More open. A beat passed. Then she said, maybe I'm just tired of pretending. I didn't speak. The words were too sharp, too exact. She turned toward me fully. You saw me the other night. I know you did. I swallowed. Yeah. And I saw you, she said. Before that. In the kitchen. In the hallway. Every time your eyes didn't move fast enough. I looked down. I didn't mean. You did, she said. And it's okay. I met her eyes. I'm not a kid anymore, I said. She took a breath. No, you're not. And I don't look at you like one. Not anymore. The pond rippled in silence. Birds rustled in the trees above. It's been confusing, I admitted. I keep trying to convince myself that I'm imagining all of this, that I'm reading into things. And are you? I shook my head. No. She nodded slowly. I wanted to see if you'd say something, or if you'd keep pretending like I didn't notice. We stood there, still, the space between us charged. Then she said quietly, you've changed. You walk differently. You hold yourself differently. You look at me like I'm not just your aunt anymore. You're not, I said. You never were. Not really. Something shifted in her face. A softness, a flash of vulnerability. That scares me a little, she admitted. Me too. Another long pause. Then she said with a half smile, I liked the way you looked at me. I shouldn't say that, but I did. I breathed out, slower than I realized I'd been holding it in. We started walking back, slowly, not saying much more. The sun had dipped below the trees now, and everything was bathed in fading blue light. The world felt quieter, but not empty. Back at the house, she unlocked the door and stepped inside ahead of me. She turned on the hallway lamp. The warm glow filled the space between us. I'm going to make some tea, she said. Want some? I nodded. We sat on opposite sides of the living room. The same couch as before. The same silence, but this time it felt welcome. Familiar. She handed me a mug and curled up with hers, blanket tucked loosely around her knees. I thought maybe this was just in my head, I said after a while. It wasn't. You could have stopped me. She looked over the rim of her mug. I didn't want to. I stared at her for a second, heart in my throat. She set her tea down gently. I didn't plan for this, she continued, but I also didn't look away. I know. She leaned her head back, eyes closing for a moment. Then she said, quieter, more carefully, if you're still curious. She opened her eyes and looked at me, calm and steady. You know where I sleep. The sentence hung in the air like a wire pulled tight. Not a command. Not an invitation. Just truth. She stood, stretching slowly, her cardigan falling loosely around her. Good night, she said softly. Night. And then she disappeared down the hallway, barefoot. The soft click of her door the only sound that followed. I sat there, staring at the empty space she left behind. The tea had gone cold in my hands. My heart hadn't. I didn't know what I was going to do next, but I knew nothing about this house, about us, would ever feel the same again.
Bye-bye.